Amelia had lived most of her life in control. As the CEO of a powerful company, she was used to boardrooms, flashing cameras, and people who bent over backward to meet her demands. But that night, alone on a deserted road with her luxury car sputtering to silence, control slipped from her grasp. The city lights were far in the distance, and her phone barely had a signal. For the first time in a long time, frustration and helplessness crept into her carefully guarded world. Just then, the growl of an old pickup truck broke the silence. Out stepped Daniel, a mechanic whose oil-stained hands and worn jacket spoke of a life far removed from hers. He noticed the stalled car and the elegant woman inside. With a polite nod, he offered to help. Amelia, masking her unease with humor, leaned back and smirked. "If you fix this engine, I'll marry you," she laughed, her words meant to amuse herself more than him. Daniel didn't laugh. He didn't even respond with a clever remark. Instead, he quietly popped the hood and got to work. His hands moved with steady precision, each motion careful, patient, and filled with the kind of quiet confidence that only comes from years of honest labor. Amelia watched, initially entertained, but slowly her smile faded. There was something disarming about his focus, his calm in the face of a problem. She had seen executives panic over less, yet this man treated the broken engine with respect, as though it were alive. The night grew still, the stars brighter overhead, as she studied him. For the first time in years, Amelia felt something shift inside her, a recognition that perhaps not all strength came from power, but from humility and heart. Daniel leaned into the open hood, the dim glow of his flashlight illuminating the maze of wires and steel. His hands, roughened by years of labor, moved with a steady rhythm, twisting, checking, adjusting, as if the machine were speaking a language only he could understand. Amelia stood a few steps away, arms crossed, her designer heels tapping against the pavement. At first, she wore her amusement like armor, her eyes lingering on the grease stains smudging his sleeves, the old truck parked crookedly behind them. In her world, power meant polished shoes, sharp suits, and meetings that decided futures. This was foreign. Yet as the minutes slipped by, something subtle began to change. She caught the unwavering concentration in his eyes, the way he didn't rush, didn't panic, didn't even look for approval. There was no performance here, no audience to impress. Only a man and his work. The joke she had tossed out earlier, about marrying him if he fixed the engine, suddenly felt shallow against the quiet dignity radiating from him. Her smile faded, replaced by curiosity, then something she couldn't name. Amelia realized she had spent years surrounded by ambition so loud it drowned out sincerity. But Daniel was different. His silence wasn't empty. It was powerful. Watching him, she felt a pang of humility, as though the world was reminding her that true strength often whispers instead of shouts. For the first time in a long time, Amelia let her arms uncross and simply observed. The night stretched around them, the hum of distant crickets filling the silence. She saw not just a mechanic bent over an engine, but a man carrying a kind of resilience that boardrooms and skyscrapers could never teach. And for reasons she couldn't explain, her heart began to stir. The silence of the night was broken by the sudden rumble of the engine springing back to life. Amelia's eyes widened as the car, moments ago lifeless, now purred with renewed strength. She stood frozen, her breath caught between disbelief and admiration. That offhand remark she had made, the one about marrying him if he fixed the engine, echoed in her mind, no longer sounding playful but strangely weighted, as though fate had decided to toy with her. Daniel stepped back calmly, brushing his hands on a rag pulled from his pocket. There was no triumphant grin, no expectation of praise. He didn't demand recognition or remind her of the joke. Instead, his voice was quiet, almost gentle, when he finally spoke. Sometimes all it takes is patience, and a little heart. The words hung in the air, simple yet profound, cutting through Amelia's polished facade. For years she had lived in a world where power was everything, where conversations were sharpened like knives and every deal was a battle of egos. But here stood a man who had just done the impossible for her, and treated it as nothing more than an act of service. Her chest tightened, not with pride, but with something she hadn't felt in a long time: humility. This wasn't about a car or a mechanic's skill. It was about character, about the kind of quiet strength that didn't need to be broadcast to the world. She looked at Daniel differently now. Not as a grease-stained stranger, but as someone who, in a single sentence, had managed to remind her of what truly mattered. And for the first time in years, Amelia felt her carefully constructed world begin to crack open. Amelia reached into her purse, pulling out a sleek wallet filled with crisp bills. It was instinct. Her whole life had taught her that problems could be solved with money, that gratitude was best expressed through transactions. Holding the cash out to him, she expected the usual nod of appreciation, the quiet acceptance she had seen from countless others. But Daniel simply shook his head, a warm smile lighting his tired features. "Just glad I could help," he said, his tone so sincere it caught her off guard. For a moment, Amelia didn't know what to say. In her world, everything had a price: time, loyalty, even friendship. Yet here was a man standing in front of her, covered in grease, who had just given her something invaluable without asking for anything in return. She felt the sting of tears at the corners of her eyes, though she quickly blinked them away. A soft laugh slipped from her lips, and this time it surprised her. It wasn't the polished laugh she used in boardrooms, or the amused one she forced at cocktail parties. This was unguarded, real, like something buried deep inside her had finally been freed. She looked at Daniel, and instead of seeing just a mechanic, she saw the kind of person she had been missing all along, someone whose worth wasn't measured by wealth or power, but by kindness. The walls she had built over years of ambition, walls of pride, control, and distance, began to crumble. And in their place, a quiet longing stirred within her. A longing not for another deal or another empire, but for something true, something human. For the first time in years, Amelia felt alive. The night air felt heavier now, charged with something Amelia couldn't quite name. She stared at Daniel, her mind replaying the careless words she had thrown out earlier: "If you fix this engine, I'll marry you." At the time, it had been nothing more than a shield of sarcasm, a way to mask her frustration. But now, standing beside him with the hum of the engine steady and the stars stretched endlessly above, those words no longer felt like a joke. Her throat tightened, and before she could stop herself, her eyes glistened with tears. She took a small breath, her voice trembling but sincere. "Maybe I wasn't joking after all." Daniel froze, his rag still in hand, his eyes searching hers not with disbelief but with quiet understanding. He didn't laugh, didn't tease. Instead, he simply held her gaze, his silence saying more than words ever could. For the first time, Amelia felt seen, not as a CEO, not as a figure of wealth and power, but as a woman who had been longing for something real, something unpolished and true. The two stood there by the roadside, the glow of headlights washing over them, the night sky their only witness. Strangers just hours ago, they were now bound by something far greater than circumstance. It wasn't wealth or ambition that connected them, it was the simple miracle of kindness, of humility, of hearts daring to recognize each other in the most unlikely of places. In that moment, Amelia understood: sometimes life's greatest promises are born not from grand gestures, but from the quiet grace of human connection. And under the vast, silent sky, hope bloomed. In the end, what began as a chance encounter on a lonely road became something far greater than a car repair. Amelia, a woman who had built her life around control, wealth, and power, discovered in Daniel a truth she had forgotten: that the greatest strength often comes not from ambition, but from humility and heart. What started as a careless joke turned into a moment of revelation, breaking down the walls she had built around herself. Daniel's quiet refusal of money, his patience, and his sincerity revealed to her that real connection isn't bought, it's felt. Their story wasn't about a CEO and a mechanic, nor about status or circumstance. It was about two souls who crossed paths when the world decided they needed each other most. And in that fleeting night under the stars, Amelia learned that love, kindness, and genuine humanity are the only engines that never fail. The miracle wasn't that the car started again. The miracle was that so did her heart.